welcome Be Stellar crew.
Hey, what's up everybody? I'm Alex Stoich. This is David Whiterick is every week. And over here we are with Kurt.
Kurt Theobald. Good to be with you guys.
Yeah. Kurt reached out to us, or had somebody reach out to us out of his company. Would love just to share his story. So, Kurt, you're an entrepreneur, right? So why don't you tell us about kind of how you got started being an entrepreneur? Like, at what age did you decide, I think that I want to go start something for myself versus, I just want to have a job and work for somebody else my whole life?
Sure. Well, when I was a teenager, even growing up, my dad was the kind of person that saw the world as it could be, not as it is, and that runs in my blood. And so when I was I had a lot of payroll jobs as a teenager. I would worked at Dairy Queen and whatever, that kind of job. And it was very the demand that I had in my heart that was unsatisfied was a demand to understand why. Why are we doing this? Why does it matter? And there was that deep need in me to have a real purpose for what I was doing.
Sure.
And it was fairly vacant in the jobs that I had growing up as a teenager. And so that thirst was unmet. And then I went to college on the standard track. And because I love teaching. It's just, I'm a natural, it's just in my heart to teach and develop others. But, so I was going to be a teacher. And I spent a year in college, and it was a great year, but I was really struggling because I also like velocity, and it was fairly slow.
Right.
So
yeah.
I took a semester off to get married to my childhood sweetheart, and now my wife of almost 20 years. And,
Congratulations. That's an accomplishment in itself.
Yeah. And when I took that semester off to get married, my brother gave me a book. It was Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Oh,
familiar with it?
We mentioned that book on
well, there you go.
Constantly.
It's one of the fundamentals of entrepreneurship.
Yes, sure.
He did a great job of laying out the value and benefits of entrepreneurship in that. So anyway, that book led to other books, and what was neat is I didn't have anything kind of setting structure for me. I could just voraciously consume content as fast as I wanted, and so that reignited a passion for entrepreneurship that was really in me from as a child. And that from that moment on, I decided I was going to change course and step out of the institutional paradigm and just go for it and go after it. My wife was on board with me.
That's important.
It is very important.
That's number one thing.
I'll tell you, the irony is that maybe irony is the wrong word. The funny thing about the story is that my father-in-law, I had told him before we got married, he wanted me to wait to get married until after I finished college.
So how old were you when you got married?
19. I had just turned 19 when we got
okay.
married.
Yeah.
And I told him that I would. I said, okay, if I marry your daughter early, then I'll finish college. He said, okay. And literally, 3 months after I married her, we're changing course. We're not doing college. And he was okay with it, but it was pretty funny that that was out the window pretty quickly. So anyway, yeah, I just I didn't have any idea what I was doing, but I started a professional journal in 2004, and in November of 2004, and in the early days of my journey, I wrote down why I believe this was going to be a success. And I said, the reason I think it's going to be a success is because this is who I am. I am an entrepreneur. That is part of my identity and part of my purpose. And so I expect to fail. I expect to make mistakes. But if I fall off the horse and don't get back on, that betrays who I am. And I will not do that.
Right.
So it is essential that I get back on the horse every single time I fall off. And I believe that if you keep getting back on the horse, you'll eventually learn to ride.
So have you ever fallen off the horse?
Oh man, I've got more war wounds than most, I think. Because
but you didn't quit.
I didn't quit. That's right, because I wanted to live true to who I am. No, I in 4.5 years, I think I ran 10 businesses into the ground, something like that.
Wow.
And ultimately,
That's a new accomplishment. I don't think I've ever heard that many.
Yeah, I was very efficient. And then I went through personal bankruptcy in 2008.
But you learned from every one of those.
Oh man, it was the very much the school of hard knocks.
Yeah.
Learned a lot, and don't regret any of it. And you know, I think the biggest thing that if I had a regret, it would be that I set bad expectations for my wife, Jess. I told her, because I was always expecting, I was just so certain that things were going to work, that whatever the next thing was, it was going to work. And so I'd be like, oh, like in 3 months, this is going to be like that, and we're going to, like, it's going to turn. And
we've had that conversation.
The money's
with
going to
our
come in. Yeah, all this money.
Don't worry about those
right.
bills.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. We've got this.
And she was a charge nurse at the time, because she got her LPN, licensed practical nurse degree, and she was a charge nurse in nursing homes, and it was very stressful, especially for someone her age. She was, I mean, you can't actually be a charge nurse in any other setting as an LPN except in the nursing home.
Sure.
And so it was just a lot of responsibility, and it was really taxing for her. So that's one thing that I regret is I didn't know how unrealistic I was being with when I was setting those expectations.
Yeah, that's.
But you eventually find a way, though. You find
Well,
a way.
that would
So
have
if
been
you
true.
shoot high,
That would have
yes.
been true. You
Yeah.
know, I heard I can't remember what the study was, but it was done on concentration camp victims of some victims and some survivors of the concentration camps, and they were comparing those that tended to survive versus those that didn't, and what the difference was in their mentality. And the ones that tended to not survive were the ones that were setting fixed dates of it's going to be this next month. I can feel it. It's going to be in the next this next period of time.
Never come.
And the ones that survived were ones that said, I don't know when it's going to happen, but it's coming.
But it's coming, okay.
And so it's this expectation of, I don't know how wide the English Channel is, but I know if I keep swimming, I'm going to find the other side. And that attitude creates the space for patience and curbs the opportunity for disappointment in a really healthy way when you're doing something when you're in the unknown. And so eventually, I discovered that mentality and operated in that paradigm.
I love that, though.
It took a lot of disappointment along the way to get
So
there.
how many years since the start until you actually started seeing real progress, real income, actually money coming, becoming financially stable a little bit? What was the span of time?
So I remember in early 2009, actually mid 2009, is when I accepted the full role, because when I partnered with my cousin to start Classy Lama, which is a company now that I've been running for the last 15 years, and I was a minority partner. I was part-time, just supporting him as he was kind of gaining traction with it. And he's an incredible practitioner and really smart business mind as well, but an incredible practitioner. And so he was gaining traction, and I was just supporting him from behind. And that was in late 2007, early 2008 when that was happening. And then by early 2009, he was like, the business is really, like, we're gaining traction here, and I'm getting torn between the technology and the business, and I need additional help. And I had a couple of things. I was still failing at things, so I had a couple of things that were slowly winding down.
Yeah, right.
And so I said, okay, well, I can come on full time, but I remember, so that was, I kind of kicked the journey off in middle of 2004, and then by middle of 2009, it was a big deal that I was paying myself $1,000 a month. Like, I remember we started doing that.
5 years later.
And I was getting $400 a month in rent for renting out the garage, because we were renting out my garage.
Okay.
And so I was making $1,400 a month, which was huge for us, and it felt like this, I think, might actually be sustainable. People actually want to pay us money for what we do.
No, that's amazing. Yeah,
That is crazy.
Because I had done a lot of businesses where some of them were more ordinary, but others were like, I'm trying to create this product that nobody's ever heard of and trying to do this thing and thinking that can happen quickly and not having the experience to understand. Like, if you're trying to do something new like that, it takes a long time
It does.
to get people
the
to adopt it.
expectation of starting a business, and we tell people it's a lot, because we have businesses where we can actually bring people into business with us, and we tell them, like, hey, the expectation is for seeing your first check is 2 or 3 months, and like it's not going to be a lot. Like, it's just going to be a little bit. Like, when you first started in financial services, he says it took him a while to get his first check. And how much was your first check?
Pay cycle was $54,000.
But what did you do? He said he was just so
I
excited.
worked for like a month and a half, man. I was like studying, getting licensed.
Yeah.
just trying to get out there, talk to people, try to, advertise my business, because we're most like, networking business. We're not really like, put a billboard on the side of the road and stuff like that. And when I saw $54.46, I was screaming to the house, I was like, babe, I'm calling my wife. We got paid. She's like, what? I'm like, yep.
Well, hey, they say that the first dollar is the hardest to earn, and so there's a lot to be said for that $54 check.
Yeah, it goes only up from then, and thank God now it's going up and it's growing and it's doing well. But every beginning is hard, and that's what we try to teach all the agents that come work with us. We don't really like to say work for us because everybody's independent contractor. So we tell them always like, look, work on yourself, be patient, right? You go expect failure. You're not just gonna make it like this. You don't start today and make
very
$1,000,000
rarely
tomorrow.
does somebody just like pop out an idea.
Every once in a
and,
while,
like, take off from there.
Yeah.
It takes a little while. When I compare it to, I looked at starting a Krispy Kreme at one point, and but if you break that down, it's like at that point it was like $450,000 just to have part of the franchise. But then you have to have the land, and then you have to have it built. Well, you're not making money at any point during that. So if you're starting a business, set the same expectation. You've got to buy into it, regardless of whatever it is, whether it's mindset, whether it's money, whether it's time, and then you have to build it. And I think probably the one things that we teach, probably the top 2 or 3 things that we try to explain here at Be Stellar is, for one, just start. So if you have a dream, start it. 1 hour a week, 30 minutes a week, something to just kickstart yourself to accomplishing that thing that you have a dream of doing. And then don't quit. And that's because people, we always compare to that picture of the guy the 2 people, and they're digging a hole, and one of them quits, and the other guy is, and they're only this far from the gold that they've been digging for, and one guy quits a foot from the gold, and the other guy finds it because he just kept digging. And I love that about like the English Channel. You know that there's another side, so just keep swimming. Just keep swimming. A lot of times you'll feel like you're going to drown.
Yeah, and that was one of the few things that I had right in my framework. I had so many things that were wrong. But one of the things that I wish I had given more credence early is the idea of being like aware, situationally aware, and bringing strategic thinking to your situation in order to. I was just reading this book called Playing to Win, which I highly recommend. It's about I think it's the Johnson & Johnson empire, or one of those, a consumer products division, or company. But in any case, they open up their books of how they built their strategy, and one of the things they talk about is just the fundamentals of strategy is where to play and how to win. And one of the things that my business partner was smarter about than I was early on was just the importance of focusing on a niche. And I wasn't resistant to that. I was like, great, let's do it. And he ultimately picked the niche, and it was really great and helped us gain early traction. But that's something that I strongly encourage any entrepreneur that's getting started is there's no doubt you got to have that. I'm just going to start and keep going and keep moving forward and not give up and eventually figure it out. But I could have figured it out a lot faster if I'd invested more in thinking strategically about how I was going to engage with the market.
Sure.
And think about take inventory. What do I have what are my strengths? What am I capable of? Where do I really shine? What are the moments where someone's really, recognized or seen, wow, you're really good at that, or I felt really alive or really full of joy. Those are my strengths. Now, how does that interface with the market in a productive way that's also unique? And when you're just getting started, unless you have a hoard of cash, you have to start narrow. I've got to start in a portion of an industry, a niche of a portion of an industry, and I can focus on that and be great. And for us, and I think this is actually a really interesting approach, emerging technology is a great thing to focus on. How can you take the new, because nobody's an expert in the new. Nobody's gained traction in the new because it's new. How do you take the new and apply it creatively and in a value-added way to an existing problem? And so what we did is we took Magento at the time, it's now Adobe Commerce, but we took Magento and we applied it to selling online. And we took a new technology that nobody was an expert in. So a few bumpkins in a garage could be just as good as anybody else.
Sure.
And we invested in that. We doubled down on that when we learned it and leveraged it to be highly successful. And it just so happened that was a niche that was growing really rapidly. There was a ton of interest in it. And we were one of the people one of the groups that was focused on it initially, and there was just very few that focused on it. The big players won't focus on emerging technology. This is the advantage of being small.
Right.
They don't. There's too many new things. They
Yeah.
can't invest in that many directions. They don't know which one's the new one that's
Which one's
going
going to work for them?
And they're building and feeding the machine. You know, it's true for my organization now. We just cannot be as agile and nimble as a new player can be. Of like, there's all these new AI technologies coming out. I'm like, I don't know which one's gonna, which ones are gonna prosper and work. And so I'm tinkering with it. I'm aware, but I'm watching to see something emerge and gain traction.
You're watching for somebody that was like you.
To see,
That's
like,
sitting in
okay,
the garage
it's
with one of
going,
them
and
and seeing
then
which one's going to actually put it
Right.
to use so
I'll
that
buy
you
you
can
out.
go, okay,
then we're
let's
getting to
do
the
that.
point where we can either acquire or we can see what's gaining traction. We can invest sufficient capital in order to develop value out of it ourselves. Things we don't have when we're small, but what we do have when we're small, we got nothing to lose.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I'm going to go after this. I think this is a good technology. I think there's a big opportunity for it. And it's all about how do we solve existing problems better, leveraging emerging technologies that are new. And when you do those two things, you create real opportunity for differentiation, even against the biggest, best players out there, because you are engaging with the new in a way they won't.
That's awesome. Like,
Wow.
you know, and that's a great mindset because most people, you know, to be honest with you, I've thought in those terms, but never like that. You know what I mean? Because, you know, for me, you know, I'm 34 and I have businesses starting. Like I said, I've done construction since I was 19. That's all I've ever known. As working, like I had jobs when I was younger. Like I worked at a take and bake pizza place for a couple of years in high school. You know, and I worked on a guy's farm when I was 13, 14. Worked at a gas station, same thing. I moved and started doing construction at 19. I didn't even know how to read a tape measure. But I fell into construction. I got married at 20. And so what was I supposed to do? Now I'm in construction. Like, I don't have a choice. So it's factories at night, construction during the day, because I've got a kid as well, and I don't have much of a choice. I don't have room to go out and fail. You know, so everybody's situation is different, but that's a great way to think about things is how do I take something and make it unique to me that's going to allow me to be successful. And that's awesome. I think that's great.
Also, a lot of people, how you said, innovate, right? Always try new things and stuff like that. Most people don't want to do that. You know, that's one of the things, downfalls of new. Because I know a lot of entrepreneurs, they're starting out, but they're not willing to actually learn something or spend time in one area. They want to do 20 areas at one time. Because this guy got successful in this guy did this. I want to do everything together. I don't want to do just one thing at a time, right? Sometimes I think I'm like that because I want to, you know, attack different things. I'm like, oh man, that sounds great. Let me do that. Let me do that. And then before you know it, you stretch some time. You don't have, you know, there's only 24 hours in a day. So we can't really, you can't really focus completely on just one thing. So around here in this area, well, we're having a hard time. We're actually figuring it out that people around here are not really innovative. You know, especially like where we live at, you know, Neosho, Joplin area. People are not really innovative, so we're trying, me and him are actually taking up upon ourselves, going out there, talking to people like, if you thought about starting a business, come work with us, come into business with us, you know? It's not, there's nothing against going and working in a factory for whatever, you know, what do we talk about, 30 years, 40 years, some people just go do that.
I admire people who can do that, for real. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's
I'm like
discipline.
you, I have that purpose driven, like, I can't just go to the same place every
But
day
imagine
and
if you
do
did
the
that
same
discipline for 40 years and put it into something that you can grow, you know, instead of just, you know, I don't have discipline to be somewhere. Like I started Marines, I was there for 10 years and I was like, I can't do this no more. Like 20 years to retirement, right? I was like, I gotta cut out.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about your business right now. Like, what does your business exactly do? Like, I know we talked a little bit before the podcast, but just break it down for us.
Okay.
So that way listeners out there that, you know, if they're interested in something you do,
Yeah, sure.
you know, they can reach out.
Well, I mean, to put it simply, we help people sell things online, but we typically work with larger businesses that are, and actually helping create efficiencies in their B2B side of things, which a lot of times people don't think of e-commerce as a B2B play. They think, well, this is selling to the end consumer that's buying it in their living room or whatever on their laptop. Well, we're helping businesses that sell to other businesses and do that more efficiently and reduce costs and present their product more effectively, because in the end, when you're selling to businesses, you're selling to people who are buying from you. They're just buying larger quantities and buying to resell to somebody else in some way or utilize in a business capacity. And so they're still consumers in a certain degree. They want a lot of the same kinds of things. They want to be able to find what they're looking for efficiently. They want to be able. They need to solve their problems quickly, and so we're greasing those wheels and creating less friction for the business side of things, the business to business side of things, leveraging digital. And we're also able to enable salespeople. Like a lot of these businesses are still doing, a salesperson receives an order, they write the order down, they maybe input it into an old system, and then it routes over. Well, we want to create more connectivity where your inventory is real time. You know that you're not selling something you don't have, or selling too much of something, or when you need to reorder. Also helping the warehouse and make sure that they have the supply that they need, and that they don't end up on back order. They keep selling, and there's just a lot of dynamics there that we're wanting to. We create value for our clients by creating efficiencies in those kinds of ways, and specifically in the B2B world, and also specifically in verticals that are maybe inglorious or unseen. So like industrials, manufacturing. Actually, you guys are Neosho Joplin area. You have a lot of that in your area.
Yes.
Automotive is a big vertical for us. Outdoors, hunting and fishing.
So you guys have your hands in a lot of different types of.
It's really neat. I mean, that's actually fairly niche down for being e-commerce focused, and then we're focused within that vertical. That's fairly focused. Yeah. But doing that allows us we understand those kinds of businesses. We relate to those kinds of stakeholders really well, and they're kind of our kind of people. So building trust with them is easier. Where when they talk to most e-commerce agencies, which tend to host from the coasts, it's just trusted doesn't come as easily.
Of course.
They're selling a lot of times the wrong ideas and the wrong things and the flashy and that kind of thing, and folks that we work with are very pragmatic and very, down to earth and efficiency minded. And
do you remember? So, when you start a business, you get those small fish that come in, that kind of give you your daily paycheck, right? Mm-hmm. But do you remember when that first whale showed up and you were like, we have to land this client?
Yeah.
Do you remember that feeling of maybe trying to chase it, or maybe when you got it?
Sure. So better question, how many did you lose of those before you actually gained one?
Well, actually the memory that brings up to me is whenever we shifted our hourly rate. So we started out billing $60 an hour, and we were billing clients that, or we were billing through a contractor. So they were subcontracting. Most of our work came through a general contractor. They were an agency that had the end client relationship, and then they would subcontract the development work to us. It was a great way to get started because we didn't have to figure out sales, marketing, or project management. They did all of that. We just did development. It was awesome. Great way to start. Then whenever we went end client, I think we increased our rates to like $85 an hour. And I remember I was doing competitive analysis, and after about a year or two of being at that level, I just said we're at a point where competitively we could be charging a lot more, and so we jumped up to I think to $150 an hour at that time, which was a huge jump.
Yeah, that is a big jump.
And I didn't know, it was scary to make that jump, and I'm like, you know what? Because my belief is usually you get an opportunity to drop back if you need to. Like if you're doing a pitch and you can pitch it and you can tell, right, just by working and building a relationship with a potential client, they're like, that's just not going to work. And so you feel it out. Like you find out where their budget's at and what how can you achieve their objectives within the budget that they have. But at a different rate, that means you can do less work. And so if we're like, they really need this other thing, let's go ahead and drop our rate. We can do that. We have the flexibility. But if you start at $85 an hour, you cannot increase that.
Sure.
You cannot be like, you know what? We actually can get a lot more than what you expect we can done, so we're going to increase our rate to 115 and do less.
Yeah, 100%.
So that was kind of the rationale behind it. Is we can always pull back. We cannot go up in mid-stride. And I remember we pitched this deal. This company in Texas, it was in the, I think it was a synthetic oil something or another company. And we pitched, it was cleaners, I think, synthetic cleaners for the racing or automotive industry, something like that. And I remember it was a bigger deal than we were used to. By that point, we probably did deals that were, you know, a $20,000 to $30,000 deal would be significant to us. That was like, this is a good one. Well, this one we ended up bidding something like $80,000, and it was like, this would be a game changer if we got this right. This would put us then you have the logo in your presentations that you do from that point on, and you have the story to tell, and no one's asking when you say, hey, what have you done like this before? And you go, we've never done this before. You have to say, now you've got one, right? You've got the first one. Yeah. And so that was big. I remember like just wondering and the anxiety and the anticipation, and then found out that we won it. It was a huge deal for us. And
probably
it's true,
surreal,
really.
Probably a little bit like,
it's like,
really just
whoa, like we're in a new space here. And of course that happened again though. It happened again later when instead of an $80,000 deal, it was maybe a $500,000 or a $600,000 or $700,000 deal. And it was like, whoa, like, okay, like I've heard of companies, agencies getting deals like this. Well, we just got that deal, and now we're looking at other stuff. So there's always that next level that seems out of reach, but
and the feeling probably never goes away. It's probably almost, you just have a little bit more of awareness of what it's going to take to take care of that company versus the first one, because in that first one, it's that kind of like, I always compare it to levels. So in that construction, you do a lot of things yourself when you start out. Well, then you hire subs, and then you have to have salesmen. But from the subs to the salesmen, you're like, okay, now I've got to find a way to pay these guys.
that's right.
So it's like, do I want salesmen? Because it's a whole hump. It's like, if I go over this hump, I'm there. Like I have no room for failure if I go this next route. And same thing whenever you're closing bigger deals. It's like, okay, if we get this, there is no turning back. Like, this is it. Like, we're going to have to implement all the stuff that we've been talking about. We've got to have to just do it. And so it's kind of surreal when it happens. You're like, oh my gosh, that's so awesome.
And then you're like, gosh, I just committed to that.
Oh no, now I've got to do it. Everything I said, now I've got to come through with, And of course there's hitches. And you'll find that most people, when you're honest with them and if you have a struggle, you can actually go to them and say, hey, listen, we're kind of like, as long as you're open about it, like, hey, we're struggling in this aspect. Either give us a little more time, let us reframe it in a different way. But as long as you go to them and say, hey, listen, this is where we're at, they're fine. If you try to hide it, that's when they get
most
upset.
people have been at that level too, Not every company that you deal with is, up on top. A lot of people stuck on the bottom, so they understand.
But you try to be, honest. But that's great. I mean, I'm always curious about whenever somebody hits their, like, what's the first memory that comes where you're like, okay, this is it. Like, we just closed a big one. Like,
well, I think it's equally important to recognize the shadow to that, to that experience, because on the shadow side of that, we hit that and like we had momentum. We were, we were in the Inc. 500 one year. It was just like stratospheric growth, and it was amazing. Well, then fast forward, and then we hit some of those points you're talking about. Of like, I think if you haven't been trained from an experienced person, the assumptions that like, if you're growing, you're making lots of money. But making money and growing are not the same thing. They're oftentimes at odds with each other.
100%.
To grow is oftentimes to not make money. Why? Yes. Because you're thinning your margins out in order to invest in the growth.
Absolutely. And
then you got to make it over, and then your margins can grow. But it actually ends up being in stair steps rather than in like this incline, where it's like you've got to grow to the next level. Then you naturalize the next level, and you get the efficiencies worked out at the next level, and then your margins come back. And then you got to decide: am I gonna go through another leg of growth?
Yeah.
And then I got to go through all that pain and the deferred gratification that is required to achieve that next level, and then you rebuild margin at that level. But it's like it's a never-ending cycle of that happening. And I think it does even out. It does get better over time, where your investments required to grow are smaller percentages of your overall organizational size.
Because you've built up enough to be able to take that step and it not be as risky as.
Yeah.
Hey, if this doesn't work, we might have to go all the way back down to the first step,
Yeah.
We talk about that in businesses, like you need to, we call it, you have to have somebody that's working on the business and not in the business.
Right.
Somebody who is looking at that potential to grow, and they have that pay cut for a little while because the money's going to the business, not to their pocket. And they've got
That's
to,
what we're trying
they've
to
got
do
to
right
work,
now.
they've got to work on the business to go, okay, what's the next area we can go into? What's the next thing we can do? I'm not going to be selling, I'm not going to be doing this, I'm going to be focused on growing this business. But that also comes with a little bit of a pay cut. But when that succeeds,
When it blows up.
then all of that work that you were doing growing the business starts to produce fruit.
Yeah,
You know,
one of the kind of the best and worst things about the way that I approached the business was that I actually never had this like hunger or thirst for profitability. And I was all about like doing something that mattered and growing a quality team, creating a great environment for people and creating value for our clients. And like, that's what I want to do. And the upside of that was that it didn't bother me when we weren't profitable. It was like, this is just part of growing. This is part of developing, and I had that mentality. It was great. The downside of that is I didn't take the need for profitability seriously enough.
Sure.
And so I would allow things to run lean too much and too long, and then when hard times came, I didn't have the
capital,
kind of the financial foundation to weather through that well. And so that was a key thing in my learning, is having a healthy balance of don't push too hard for profitability, but also don't completely ignore it.
And I think that's like,
Find
you
the
know,
middle
we talk
somewhere.
about this a lot. It's like, you know, you can ask it, like, I don't care about money that much. I want to grow something. And we always talk about leave something for our kids, you know, but, you know, sadly, money is money. You have to have it. You know what I mean? So even if you don't really care whether you get it or whatever, like, you know, the bills don't stop coming. So you do always have to have that in the back of your mind of like, I do have to take a paycheck of some sort to kind of keep everything going, but I need to put this over here for an emergency fund for those lean times. Construction's the worst, especially roofing, because, you know, from March to November, it's slammed, but then from end of November to 1st of March, you might not have anything to do. And so you have to be smart and put that emergency back so you can pay your bills all through that if you didn't get any work at all, because it's happened. So, you know, and that's the same thing. It's the same thing that applies to anybody starting a business, in my view, is that those times that you're very profitable, you got to set that money aside and have like an emergency, like, hey, if things go sideways. I mean, I don't necessarily know what could happen in your industry, but I know that you guys watch out for certain things probably too.
There's plenty of fluctuation in our industry as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So always new up and comers.
Especially when you said you have 80 to 100 employees. How do you decide, like, if it would come to like lay somebody off? How would you decide?
You know, that decision used to be a lot harder than it is now. And the reason for that is because we had a very rigid structure for our personnel. This is one of the advantages of scale as you get larger, more options open up for this, although I think you can do something like this when you're smaller. But the way we've structured our resource picture now is to allow for more scaling up and down by using what we call burstable resources, which are people that are contractors that they don't expect to be hired for a long time. They expect to have open and close. But we're able to, when we have demand scale, we're able to swell into those people, that network of people that we have, and partners that we have, and then when things contract, we shrink back. And so we kind of want our lowest potential flow of revenue and work. We want that to be, you know, equal to or a little better than our fixed team. You know, the people we've made commitments to that expect to be with us for a long time. And we've explained to the whole team, because I think initially there was like, well, does that mean you're moving in that direction? And now it like creates potential, you know, job security issues for us. And we're like, actually, it's the opposite. It's bolstering your job security, because we're creating a berm of protection around your jobs by being able to scale in and out of this burstable band that we've built in our resource picture. And so that's really helped. That's helped a lot, and that has just been, you know, over the last couple of years that we've been developing that and having success with that.
Awesome,
That's awesome. So we always ask everybody this: if you could leave a message for somebody who is trying to start a business or trying to be an entrepreneur, what would you tell them? What would be your advice? What would be your inspiration for them to do that for themselves?
The first thing that comes to my mind is do it for the right reasons. Because people that get into entrepreneurship with the purpose of money, self-glorification, fame, I don't know, those kinds of things, one, are fairly likely to fail. Two, are likely to not have the energy to persist when they do fail, because people like that tend to like to be comfortable too much. And three, if they do succeed, they might make the world a worse place by succeeding. And so I want to see people that are living on purpose in order to make the lives of people around them better. I want to see them succeed. And so, yeah, I think do it for the right reasons. And expect it to be very painful.
Painful it is.
Very
painful at all.
Very hurtful. Man, we appreciate you for letting us come up here and talk to you about your business, talk to you about your journey. Would you trade it for anything? Would you trade being an entrepreneur?
Oh, sure I would. I've got children and a wife and plenty of other things in life that are more important than this, but I am very thankful for what I've learned and the person I've become because of the journey that I've had. Entrepreneurship has been a meat grinder in the best way possible. And so I think my greatest gain from my journey has definitely been how I've grown and what I've learned. I think I'm a much better person because of it.
That's great. That's awesome.
Great. What about the future? What does the future look like for you and your company? Are you going to try venture out into something else, or are you just going to grow what you have right now? Or are you going to want to potentially invest in other things? Or
I mean, we've gotten into a really good place with the leadership team in the organization, and I mean that takes a lot of time, a lot of trial and error to work through. Not just who are the right people, but they have to work together in the right way, and getting that chemistry working. And so that's been a 15-year journey. And the crazy thing about it is like the right team that we needed in year 7 is completely different than the team that we need in year 15. And another book that I'd recommend along those, if you're at a key inflection point in the business, because there's these key points of organizational growth where you've got to completely overhaul the way you do business in order to operate at the next level. That book is called Scaling Up, and it kind of reads like a textbook. So you kind of don't try to read it cover to cover. I would recommend just see the concepts and the ideas in it, and there's a lot of good there. But it's a solid book. But within that, there's this idea that when you're hitting these points of resistance that you've got to break through, a lot of times you've got to change your leadership composition significantly in order to operate at the next level. And so that's been something we've been going through for the last couple of years, and we're really transitioning and growing up in a new level, right? We're maturing into a season of we have certain key performance indicators, KPIs that we're targeting on a profitability basis, utilization efficiency, and we've built out over the last 3 years this foundation, the systems foundation that gives us real-time insight into how everybody in our organization is performing against the KPIs. We're about to roll out a whole KPI framework for the organization that gives our people visibility into, people want to know, how am I doing? How am I performing? Giving them that insight and giving them a career path that they can get on and grow with, so they can see where they're going and how to achieve the next level and how to grow their income and things like that. Because we're a people business. We are an agency.
Yeah.
We depend on people, plugging in, staying with us, and working with us for the long term. That's amazing when that happens. And so, what can we do in order to support that? And so that's a big part of it. And then the other side of it is just a lot of investment in relationship-based selling to invest in the things the verticals that we're focused in. And so we're really set up to. My goal is not to break any growth records. It's to. I just I want to incrementally grow in a healthy way, and make a sustainable thing, something that's built to last. And we're right at that point where it feels like the right leadership team has come together. The sophistication that we need in building up the new foundations coming together to support that kind of incremental, sustainable, predictable growth. And it's been, I feel like it's been a 15-year journey getting to this point. So I'm really excited about where we're at, where we're headed. I think we're tooled to serve our clients better than we ever have before moving forward.
That's great, man. You've inspired me a little bit.
Yeah,
Just sitting here, just listening to you. I just want to let you know that I really do appreciate you for giving us the time to come and talk to you. So, that's it really.
Maybe we can come back in about a year or so, and then the company will be doing better.
I'd love
Everybody's
that.
going to be doing better, yeah.
That's
Sounds
awesome.
good.
That'd be great.
Well, thanks for tuning in. Remember, always be stellar. Always try to do the best that you can possibly do. Don't quit. I'm David Wyatt.
Alex Ostoich, see you guys next week. Talk to you later.